Mrs. Egondo would often walk around the house wearing skimpy clothes, clearly aware of Ikenna's presence. What Amarachi had previously overlooked now became glaringly obvious. She decided enough was enough. Mama, your time for Omugo has passed. I have 2 babysitters now, and I can manage. You should return home, she said to her mother. But Mrs. Egondo wouldn't hear of it. She told Amarachi, Amarachi, are you sending me away? Let me tell you, I am not going anywhere until I am satisfied. You have no right to send me anywhere. Enokwa. Ekwengi noro, enokwa esemo igala. Basana kwa anyago. In Umumba, a serene village in eastern Nigeria, nestled amidst lush green hills and flowing streams, a young lady named Amarachi lived with her family of 7, born to Mr. Amadi and Mrs. Egondo. She was the eldest of 5 children. Her brothers, Chima, Gozie, and Nonso, along with her sister Ebube, filled the household with joy and chaos. Yet, it was Amarachi who shone brightest, known for her beauty and kind-hearted, admired by many in her village. Amarachi's childhood was not easy. Life in Umumba wasn't filled with the luxuries that many children enjoyed, but she found solace in her father's presence. Mr. Amadi, a humble man of wisdom, guided her through every challenge. He would often take her by the hand, lead her to the village stream, and tell her stories of resilience, strength, and love. Amarachi, my daughter, he would say, his deep voice filled with warmth. You may not have much now, but what you carry inside you is priceless. Your beauty, your heart, they will guide you to where you need to be. She smiled and nodded, holding on to every word her father had said. Years passed, and with her father's constant support, Amarachi made it to university. It was a new world for her, full of opportunities. She was determined to succeed, not just for herself, but for her family. The moment she stepped through the gates of the university, she knew her life was about to change. But as she settled into her new life, something unexpected happened. Men began to approach her, offering their hands in marriage. Word of her beauty had spread, and her suitors were many. They came with promises of wealth, comfort, and love. One evening, Mr. Amadi sat Amarachi down. He knew of the suitors and the pressure they placed on his daughter. Amarachi, my daughter, he began, his voice steady. It's time to think about settling down. Choose one of these men. It won't stop you from completing your education. Your mother and I want to see you happy, and you can continue with your studies after you are married. Amarachi listened carefully. She had grown to trust her father's judgment over the years. After much thought, she decided to accept the proposal of Ikenna, a wealthy, handsome businessman from the neighboring village, who had been persistent since her secondary school days. Their wedding was the talk of the town. People from far and wide gathered to witness the union of Amarachi and Ikenna. It was an elaborate celebration filled with music, dancing, and feasting. Amarachi's family, especially her father, beamed with pride. It was a day of joy, the start of a new chapter in Amarachi's life. Months after their wedding, Amarachi discovered she was pregnant. Overwhelmed with joy, she shared the news with her husband, Ikenna. His reaction was beyond her expectations. He swept her into his arms, laughing with happiness. "My love, we will celebrate this in a grand way," Ikenna said, his voice filled with excitement. "When you give birth to our first child, I will buy you a car." Amarachi couldn't help but smile. Her life with Ikenna was one filled with love and promises. He adored her and did everything in his power to make her happy. Back in Umumba, Amarachi's family was overjoyed by the news of her pregnancy. Her father, Mr. Amadi, couldn't contain his excitement. "My first grandchild," he said, his voice filled with pride. "Wow, I can't wait to hold the baby." As he was talking, his wife, Mrs. Egondo, was just as excited as he is. Immediately, she began to prepare for Omogo, the traditional care mothers provide for their daughters after childbirth. She started telling everyone in the village about the upcoming arrival of her grandchild. Amarachi's journey was just beginning. Her life seemed perfect, but little did she know that challenges lay ahead, ones that would test her strength, her love, and the bond she shared with her family. Amarachi's pregnancy had brought immense joy to her family. During one of her antenatal checkups, she discovered something surprising. She wasn't just carrying one baby, but twins. The news was a cause for celebration. Ikenna, her husband, could hardly contain his excitement. "Twins?" Amarachi whispered in disbelief, her heart full of excitement. Ikenna squeezed her hand and grinned widely. "My love, this is beyond our dreams. 2 babies?" he exclaimed, his eyes brimming with happiness. "We will celebrate this like never before." And so, when the day came, Amarachi gave birth to her beautiful twins baby girls. The house was filled with joy, laughter, and visitors. Ikenna, true to his word, ordered a brand new Jeep for Amarachi and even went a step further, purchasing a house in the name of the twins and opening accounts for them. Mrs. Egondo arrived shortly after the birth for Omugo, the traditional post-birth care given by the mothers. But as soon as she stepped foot into Amarachi's new home, her eyes widened at the sheer luxury that surrounded her. The jeep, the house, the wealth, it was more than she had ever imagined. "So this is how well Ikenna takes care of you?" Mrs. Egondo asked Amarachi one day, her voice dripping with envy. "You are truly blessed, my daughter." Amarachi smiled, not noticing the undercurrent in her mother's tone. But her father, Mr. Amadi, had warned her before her mother's arrival, telling her to be cautious around Mrs. Egondo. Amarachi brushed it off, not thinking much of it at the time. The first sign of trouble came one afternoon. Amarachi and Ikenna were talking quietly in their bedroom when, out of nowhere, Mrs. Egondo barged in, completely naked. Amarachi gasped in shock. Hey! Mama Nkakwana gini. What is this? Why would you walk in like this? Can't you see my husband is here? But Mrs. Egondo laughed casually, brushing it off, and he said, if your husband is around, so what? I just came to get soap for my bed. There is nothing to be ashamed of, she said. Ikenna, uncomfortable and embarrassed, quickly left the room, but for Amarachi, the incident left a bitter taste in her mouth. Something wasn't right. From that very moment on, Amarachi began to notice more of her mother's strange behavior. Mrs. Egondo would often walk around the house wearing skimpy clothes, clearly aware of Ikenna's presence. What Amarachi had previously overlooked now became glaringly obvious. She decided enough was enough. Mama, your time for Omugo has passed. I have 2 babysitters now, and I can manage. You should return home, she said to her mother. But Mrs. Egondo wouldn't hear of it. She told Amarachi, Amarachi, are you sending me away? Let me tell you, I am not going anywhere until I am satisfied. You have no right to send me anywhere. Enokwa. Ekwengi noro, enokwa esome gala. Basanakwa anyago. Meaning, am I here because of you? Telling me I should go. Take your time, oh. Shocked and frustrated, Amarachi turned to her husband Ikenna for support, but Ikenna merely shrugged. It's your mother. You have to handle it, he said dismissively, walking away. Amarachi felt helpless. After all those dramas, one day, Amarachi took the twins to the hospital for their routine checkup. When she returned home, exhausted from the day's stress, she noticed that her bedroom door was locked. From behind the door, she heard noises that made her heart sink. 2 people laughing, talking, and unmistakably in bed together. Her hands trembled as she turned the knob, forcing the door open. What she saw made her world come crashing down. There in her own bed were her mother and her husband, Egondo and Ikenna, together. The scene before her was like a nightmare. Amarachi screamed in disbelief, dropping everything she was holding. They showed no remorse, no shame. They merely looked at her, unconcerned, as if what they had done was perfectly acceptable. Amarachi, unable to comprehend the betrayal, stood frozen in shock. Heartbroken, Amarachi turned to the one person she could trust, her father, Mr. Amadi. When she told him what had happened, his face darkened with fury. That woman, he spat, shaking his head. I warned you, Amarachi, I warned you. I warned you about her. Without hesitation, Mr. Amadi called Egondo and gave her an ultimatum. Come back to the village or I will report your shameful behavior to the Umunna. This is unacceptable. On realizing that her cover had been blown, Egondo finally left Amarachi's house. But the damage was already done. Although Mrs. Egondo had left, Ikenna, the husband who had betrayed Amarachi, remained. Amarachi now faced a heartbreaking decision. How would she deal with the betrayal of the 2 people closest to her? Would she be able to rebuild her life for the sake of her twins? Or would the weight of the betrayal destroy her? After Egondu's disgraceful exit from Amarachi's home, the cracks in Amarachi's marriage deepened. Ikenna, once so loving and attentive, grew cold and distant. The warmth that once filled their home was gone, replaced by silence and indifference. One fateful afternoon, as Ikenna left his phone on the table in the living room, a message from Egondo flashed on the screen. Amarachi's heart raced as she saw her mother's name. Curiosity and dread filled her as she opened the message, only to read the horrifying words that shattered her world. The message said, "Ikenna, I am pregnant." Amarachi screamed in rage, her heart pounding with disbelief. Confronting Ikenna later that evening, she demanded answers, but to her shock, Ikenna barely blinked. "Mind your business, Amarachi," he said coldly. "If your mother is carrying my child, what's the big deal? It's not like I'm the first man to father a child with his wife's mother." He walked away, leaving Amarachi standing there, crushed by the weight of his words. Unable to bear the betrayal alone, Amarachi called her father. The news devastated him. He had always known Egondu's tendencies, but never imagined it would go this far. Mr. Amadi fell gravely ill after hearing the truth, and within days he passed away in his sleep. Amarachi was shattered. The loss of her father was a wound that cut deeper than anything else. Her rock, her guiding light, was gone. As she wept over his body during the burial, a new revelation came to light. It was at her father's burial that Amarachi learned the truth. Egondo was not her biological mother. Her real mother had died giving birth to her, and Egondo, her mother's younger sister, had married Mr. Amadi soon after. The revelation hit Amarachi like a storm. Everything she knew about her life was unraveling. She now understood why her relationship with Egondo had always been strained, why there was always a subtle distance between them. After the burial, Egondo shamelessly moved into Amarachi's house, her pregnancy now visible for all to see. Amarachi protested fiercely, but Ikenna silenced her once again. "I want my sons with me," he said, his voice as cold as ever. "Egondo is carrying twin boys, something you couldn't give me." Amarachi's heart shattered into a million pieces. Not only had her husband betrayed her with her own stepmother, but now he openly favored the boys Egondo was carrying, dismissing the daughters Amarachi had given him. Desperate for help, Amarachi reported the situation to the family, hoping that tradition and justice would be on her side. But when Ikenna learned of her actions, he punished her severely. He blocked her access to their joint account, leaving her with nothing except the small allowance for their daughters. Time passed, and Egondo eventually gave birth to her twin boys. Ikenna, overjoyed, bought another mansion for Egondo and her sons, leaving Amarachi and her daughters to fend for themselves. Amarachi was devastated, but she refused to give up. Her life had taken a painful, unexpected turn, but her daughters were her strength. She raised them with love, Despite the absence of their father, though she could no longer continue her education as planned, Ikenna's relatives offered her some help. Though it wasn't enough, but Amarachi struggled. She found strength in the love she had for her daughters. Each day was a battle, but she fought on, knowing that no matter what, she would never abandon her children the way Ikenna had abandoned her. Thank you for watching. This is where our story ends. But before we finally draw the curtain, let's look into our moral lessons. Self-worth over circumstances. Amarachi's story teaches us that even in the face of betrayal and loss, our self-worth should not be tied to how others treat us. Despite being abandoned by her husband, Amarachi found the strength to continue, knowing her value and the value of her daughters. The importance of integrity. Ikenna and Egondo's actions demonstrate the consequences of living without integrity. Their betrayal destroyed a family and caused untold pain, a reminder that deceit and selfishness lead to ruin. Family does not always mean blood. Amarachi's discovery that Egondo was not her biological mother underscores the idea that true familial bonds are built on love and respect, not just blood relations. Resilience in the face of adversity. Amarachi's strength in raising her daughters alone shows that even when life deals us the hardest blows, we can find resilience within ourselves to keep moving forward. The power of a mother's love. Despite everything, Amarachi's love for her daughters never faltered. Her story highlights the enduring power of a mother's love, a love that can overcome any challenge. In conclusion, Amarachi's journey, though filled with heartache, is one of resilience and strength. She found the courage to rebuild her life for the sake of her children, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. Thank you once again for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, like, comment and share, and also touch that bell button so that you will be notified each time we put out new video. Subscribe for more stories with powerful life lessons. Please and please subscribe to help us grow our channels. God bless you all as you do so. Bye bye. Love you. Mwah.